House Bill 208, an act relating to education and declaring an emergency. Representative Regina Huff.
Gentleman from McCracken.
Mr. Speaker, I yield to the lady from Whitley 82 for explanation of the bill and motion thereon.
Chair recognizes the lady from Whitley 82 for explanation of bill and a motion thereon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 208 addresses changes that we need to make in Senate Bill 177 that we passed last session. We allotted some variances of calculation and seek and issues of NTI that need to be addressed. Mr. Speaker, would you have the clerk report House Committee Sub 1?
Clerk, please report.
House Committee Substitute 1 to House Bill 208.
Lady from Whitley.
Thank you. House Committee Substitute 1 simply ensures that we are addressing this school year only in House Bill 208, with the exceptions of two sections in the bill. One is where it applies to the mandate of the district's NTI plan for 2021-22, which is only the 10 days that are already in statute. And they must submit a plan to KDE by May the 1st. There is nothing in the bill that allows for unlimited NTI next year, because all other NTI provisions are limited to 2020-21 school year, as stated in the last section of the bill. The only other component that addresses the next year is how we would determine how SEEK is calculated for 21-22 school year. If there are any questions, I move for adoption of House Committee Sub 1.
Motion is for the adoption of House Committee Substitute 1. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor signify by voting aye. Those opposed, nay. House Committee Substitute 1 is adopted. Lady from Whitley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 208, as I mentioned, had some much-needed areas to address. It specifies that the SEEK funding for the current school year, as well as the next school year, will be based on average daily attendance as selected by the district last spring, or the 2009 end-of-the-year count of 2020. This is simply the necessary way to calculate school funding based on how the SEEK formula exists in statute. SEEK funding is always calculated from the prior year's attendance. The language of the bill we passed last year in House and Senate Bill 177 allowed districts to measure participation this year rather than attendance. Without attendance data, there is simply no way to calculate SEEK funding, and this bill conforms to what has been practiced this school year as the Senate Bill 177 allotted. However, going forward, and I want to make that clear, beginning next year, attendance will be required for the calculation of SEEK next year and every year following, as far as this bill goes. The bill also requires that the district, as I mentioned, submit a plan for non-traditional instruction in the upcoming year to the Department of Education by May the 1st. This is their district and their plan of implementation of the statutory 10 days for NTI and nothing more. This will also be in addition of a lot of other information that they already provide to KDE in their comprehensive plans. Again, schools have the opportunity to utilize non-traditional instructional days pre-COVID. Many schools chose to participate, many schools did not. This just requires the districts to submit a plan of how they are going to implement those 10 days. And finally, that districts are given the flexibility to, when in the classroom, use up to 30 minutes of instructional time per day, and that adds up to be probably 5 minutes a period, to take temperatures, instruct students on sanitize and washing hands and masks, and this is on and above the 5 minutes that it takes to get to and from class. This bill is a priority and must be passed in a timely manner, and we are moving toward the deadline. This provides how we calculate SEEK, and we also need it for the current waivers of school nutrition, and this means students would have to do a summative assessment rather than a formative assessment, and we're still working that out as far as KDE, but what the purpose and the content of this bill is that we do a formative assessment to use as a benchmark to plan and design instruction going forward, and for summer school as well. As I said, there's a March 4 deadline on these issues, and that's the reason for the emergency clause. Again, I will emphasize this. These allowances are for this current year only. When school starts in the fall, we expect to operate as usual, and this bill does not change that. However, I do want to address this school and ensure that every school is open for instruction. I think it's time that all students across the Commonwealth have in-person instruction. We need to get children back on the radar, not only for their educational instruction, but to monitor their well-being. Mr. Speaker, would you have the clerk report House Floor Amendment 5?
Clerk, please report.
House Floor Amendment 5 to House Bill 208.
Lady from Whitley.
Thank you. House Floor Amendment 5 requires districts to return to the classroom this spring. It requires a deadline of March the 29th to open their physical classrooms for at least 4 days a week and requires every student to have access to that physical classroom at least 2 days a week. This also aligns with the current KDE financial incentive that they are providing for districts that meet the certain criteria to open 12 hours of in-person, and that incentive will begin April the 1st. The amendment allows students, upon written request to the school, to continue remote instruction the rest of the school year. If the family decides to return to in-person instruction, they can revoke that written request and return to the classroom at any time. This amendment would allow districts to use 5 days as necessary, whether it be for snow, flu, or natural disaster, or even COVID of NTI, but they are limited to 5 days the rest of the school year. The only exception to this would be if a district were to move to the red county, as we've been measuring, then the commissioner could have the flexibility to grant additional days, but those would be upon his granting. This measure allows all other local control to be involved with every other decision. This is only mandates that you attend 80% of the instructional week with children in their seats 40% of the instructional time. You're free to go ahead and provide instruction as you choose, district per district. Mr. Speaker, if there's no questions, I move for adoption of House Floor Amendment 5.